Good morning. If everyone's attention, we'll call meeting 4 of the Standing Committee on House Education to order. It's good to have you here today. I would ask our guests that you please, if you want to speak on a particular bill, there is a sign-up sheet in the back to please sign that up. Additional testimony will be at the discretion of the chair, depending on time that we have. Also, reminders: there are no signs permitted in the committee room. Please be sure, members and guests, to silence your cell phones. Do we have any members right now that have any introductions or other comments to begin the meeting? Okay. Well, we're glad to have everybody here this morning. Mariah, would you please call the roll?
Representative Ballman?
Present.
Representative Bojanowski?
Here.
Representative Brown? Representative Emily Callaway?
Present.
Representative Josh Callaway? Representative Decker?
Present.
Representative Doan?
Present.
Representative Jackson?
Present.
Representative Lewis?
Here.
Representative Massaroni?
Present.
Representative McCool? Representative Rayburn?
Here.
Representative Rawlings?
Here.
Representative Raymond?
Here.
Representative Riley?
Here.
Representative Timoney?
Here.
Representative Weber?
Here.
Representative Wilner? Here. Representative Baker?
Here.
Representative Truitt?
Here.
Chair Tipton?
Here. Good to have everybody here. We do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda today is House Bill 288. That is a bill that I am sponsoring. I'm going to assume turn the duties of the chair over to Vice Chair Baker, and I will go to the table.
Yeah, me too. I might just throw it. Good morning, Chair Tipton and your guests. Would y'all please identify yourselves for the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. James Tipton, State Representative, House District 53.
Katomi Okakura.
Okay, thank you. If you would, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Members, there's a committee sub in your packet. The sub was emailed out to each of you last night along with the agenda. Chairman Tipton, could you please explain the bill and the proposed sub, please?
Sure. Let me first off share what's in the committee substitute. After the bill was filed, I had some stakeholders came and talked to me with some questions and some recommendations. And really, there are two changes in the committee sub from the original bill. In the original bill, it talked about local school districts in indemnification. We changed that language and used the word that they have immunity. That was part of that was similar language that was used in Senate Bill 1, 2019. And after looking at that, we made that change. There's another provision in the bill that calls for schools to respond with information in 10 days. And we changed that to 10 working days because, especially like a Christmas holiday, some of the holidays, just to give more time. So those are the changes in the committee sub, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions on the sub? Okay, we have a motion and a second. No other questions. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Chairman Tipton, if you'll go ahead and proceed with the bill.
Thank you. The goal of House Bill 288 is to protect our Kentucky students, our children, while at the same time respecting the due process rights of teachers. Many of you may have seen late last year a story by the Lexington Herald-Leader. Undertook a review of these types of teacher misconduct cases. They looked from 2016 through 21. and they cited numerous incidents of this happening across the state. Even before I read that Herald Leader article, it would not be uncommon to read a news clip from somewhere here in the state where a situation like this has occurred. You know, this is a bill that applies to all 120 counties, all 171 of our public school districts, and quite frankly, our private schools as well. We want to keep our children safe. The investigation highlighted several instances in several counties. They found that during that 5-year time period, 194 teachers whose teaching license was voluntarily surrendered, suspended, or revoked by EPSB, and 61% of those traced back to some form of sexual misconduct. Of the 118 teachers accused of sexual misconduct by EPSB, 37% of them were never prosecuted with a crime, and 31% had the charges dismissed, got probation, or served less than a year in jail. The goal of this legislation is to provide stronger requirements for disclosing previous misconduct and sets forth processes to ensure school districts can pursue vetting candidates thoroughly and act decisively when serious violations have been investigated and confirmed. And at this time, I'd like to turn the table over to Katomi, because I think she has firsthand experience, and I think it's important that you hear her story.
My name is Katomi Okakura, and I'm a student at the University of Kentucky and a graduate of Kentucky K-12 public schools. I'm here today to voice my support for House Bill 288, not only as a student, but as a survivor of grooming and sexual abuse carried out by my high school teacher. I was a teenager when the teacher created a private group chat with me and my friend on Remind, a texting platform utilized by my high school to update classes on assignments and important information. He would work to gain my trust, talking with me behind closed doors of his office, asking me about my personal life, and offering me homemade food when my grandfather passed away. After gaining my trust, he would emotionally manipulate me and the other students he favored, publicly shunning and alienating anyone who did something to upset him. Other adults and school staff observed this flirtatious teasing and conversations that occurred behind closed doors, unaware of the grooming occurring before their eyes and reinforcing my belief that what was going on was normal. Unfortunately, the texts and teasing escalated when he began tutoring me. During these tutoring sessions, he gave massages, exposed himself, digitally penetrated me, and manipulated my hands for his own pleasure. I remember being frozen with shock, overwhelmed with confusion and the feeling I was going to throw up, and terrified to do something that could upset him. An anonymous adult eventually raised concerns to the principal of the school. However, the exploration into the concerns ceased after the principal questioned the teacher and contacted my parents, who knew of the tutoring sessions but were unaware of what really happened during them. It wasn't until college, talking with my college friends, that I began to fully understand that my high school experience was not normal or appropriate. In the time between the anonymous adult's concerns and my report to the Kentucky State Police, the teacher confessed his love to a recent graduate and continued texting high school students individually. The teacher who abused me did not stop grooming other students after his actions were first questioned. This bill is important because it can help prevent these teachers from being able to continue abusing students. I hope that you support House Bill 288, as I have lived through the overwhelming fear and shame and the inescapable nightmares that result from abuse at the hands of a teacher, an adult whom children are supposed to be able to trust. I want to thank you for letting me speak today and share my story, which is just one of many in Kentucky. I hope you vote in favor of this bill and help prevent any more students from having a story similar to mine. Thanks.
Thank you.
Katomi, thank you for being willing to come forward and share your personal story. I know it cannot be easy, but I think it's important to shine light on a very important issue that we need to address here in the state of Kentucky, because I could have brought many more people in here today, but I appreciate Katomi's bravery and courage in this battle. Let me just briefly go through the House Bill 288. Section 1 states that a public school district or public charter school shall not enter into a non-disclosure agreement relating to a misconduct involving a minor or student. Section 2 adds the definition of abusive conduct to the requirements on personnel actions and background checks. It requires applicants for jobs to disclose if they have been the subject of allegations or investigations involving misconduct in the previous 12 months. And I want to stop there and kind of talk about that for a moment. Originally, we had some language that didn't have the 12 months in it, but, in thinking about the due process for teachers, because we do know that there are teachers, we've heard stories, examples, teachers who are falsely accused. That happens. The purpose for the 12 months is there might be an ongoing investigation that has not had any kind of public record, hasn't been finished, and we wanted to have that protection in there. It has the requirements for background checks. There are two types of background checks that districts can use. You have the FBI background check, and then you have the one from the Administrative Office of the Courts. It sets forth the information that must be included in the application and requirements for districts to investigate when an allegation against an employee is made. And we set up a process that when an allegation is made, that has to go to the principal and then on to the superintendent. We want a requirement that these things are followed up with, that they're not brushed aside. So that language is in there. Section 3, require KBE on regulations to add language to reconcile this chapter with employment standards in Section 4. Section 4 refers to the requirements for criminal background checks, and it also includes provisions for certified non-public schools. So those are the private schools that are certified through KDE. Section 5 deals with professional development. It requires KDE and EPSB to develop a training for school district employees. Section 6 exempts the disclosure provisions in Section 2 from the requirement to remove all records and references relating to an allegation of a criminal offense that did not lead to formal charges, was found not guilty, or charges were dismissed. What we really want to do, we want to make sure that when an investigation is begun, it is completed. I will share a story from a daughter of a family member, and this happened many years ago. And she experienced situations similar to Katomi. A teacher was making inappropriate sexual advances toward her. Parents objected, didn't really get anywhere, but the parents found out this same situation had happened with this teacher in another school district. What happened was this employee just very quietly resigned. The school district, not wanting to go through a lot of headache and red tape, they just dropped it. So there was no record to show that this allegation had been made in a previous school district. So we are requiring that all school districts come to a conclusion. If its evidence is found that that teacher did something inappropriate, it needs to be recorded. For the sake of the teachers who might have been falsely accused, that investigation needs to be completed if they are exonerated. So there is a record there. That's the reason we put that in there. That's really the essence of the bill. I'll be happy to try. I know there's a lot in here. I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that any of the members have. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We have one question right now. Representative Bojanowski.
Thank you for sharing your story. I think by speaking out, you can save other children from going through the same thing that you did. And I know that's a very heavy load to carry, and I appreciate you being here. I think you answered my question, Chair, in that my concern was if there was an allegation that was shown to not be true, that allegation would be removed from the records. And if I understand correctly, that allegation would only be on for 12 months then, in case there's something ongoing, or if the allegation is shown to be false, would it then be removed?
Let me go through that again. On the application process, there's a question: have you been subject of an allegation or investigation in the last 12 months? That's on the application process. There's also a requirement for school districts to check the references of all previous school districts that teacher had worked in. That district would be required, if an investigation had happened would be required to come to a conclusion, to complete that investigation, and then whatever that conclusion was would stay in that teacher's record. That way, if we ask them, have you ever been an allegation, a lot of these have been exonerated. We don't want to give somebody a black eye off the beginning. That's why we used the 12 months. But we also put the process in here where the school district is required to check references. And if there is an investigation, that former school district is required to share that data, and they're required to respond back. We want transparency. I understand we're trying to find a balance between protecting our children and protecting the due process rights of our teachers. And I think most people that I've talked to in the education community do not want those people in the classroom. They understand that that's a black eye, that is a stain on the education and teaching profession. So that's the balance I'm trying to find here.
Okay, we do have one additional question right now. Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chairman, for bringing this forward. And that last statement was, I think, the perfect way to summarize this. I mean, it's that fine line. We've got to follow the due process that every teacher's allowed under law, but at the same time, we have that we have to protect our kids. So it's a tall task. One question for you, real quick: had you considered including coaching language in here, coaches or extracurriculars?
I certainly will consider that if the language does not include that. It does reference school district employees. Coaches sometimes are volunteers, non-paid volunteers, so be more than open to exploring that and seeing if that's something we can strengthen that or add to in the Senate.
Any additional questions? Okay, I know we had a motion by Representative Bauman. We had a second over this way. Didn't quite hear who that was. Massaroni. Thank you, Representative Massaroni. Okay. Looks like there are no further questions. Mariah, please call the roll.
Representative Baker?
Yes.
Representative Ballman?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Yes.
Representative Brown?
Yes.
Representative Emily Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Josh Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Doan?
Yes.
Representative Jackson?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massaroni?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
Yes.
Representative Rawlings?
Yes.
Representative Raymond?
Yes.
Representative Riley? Representative Timoney?
Yes.
Representative Truitt?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Yes.
Chair Tipton?
Yes.
Okay. Looks like House Bill 288 passes with the expression of opinion that the same should pass with a committee sub attached thereto. Thank you both very much for your testimony.
The next item on our agenda is House Bill 331. Will the presenters please come forward? Bring any guests, introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Representative Ruth Ann Palumbo from Lexington.
Good morning. I'm Representative Kim Mosier from the 64th District.
And I am Matt Mangine.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed with your presentation. And I believe there is a committee substitute.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain what's in the committee substitute?
May I start? Excuse me, may I start first? House Bill 331 is a result of bipartisan collaboration to help students in Kentucky. And you can see we worked together, but we didn't know she was going to wear red and I was going to wear blue today. There is a committee sub.
explain? Sure, I'd be happy to explain the committee sub. What we did is strengthened the emergency action plan in this language. We added a cardiac emergency response plan, and we added that a rehearsal of this plan will be a simulated rehearsal. So that's basically the committee sub. All else stayed the same.
Do we have any members that have any questions, comments before we vote on the sub? Seeing none, all those in favor of the committee sub say aye. Any opposed, no. Committee sub passes. Representative Palumbo, Representative Mosier, please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The purpose of House Bill 331 is to save lives. The reason is that 3 families that we know about in Kentucky have suffered grievous losses of their sons because an AED was either not available or not accessible to save their lives. It's these families' missions to see this doesn't happen to any other children. House Committee substitute for House Bill 331 requires automatic external defibrillators in every middle and high school building. There will be an emergency plan. Every school will maintain a portable automated external defibrillator in a public, readily accessible, well-marked location in every middle school building and high school building, and one shall be available at every school-sanctioned athletic practice or competition, as well as play practice, other events that happen at the school dances, whatever the school-sanctioned event might be. Every public high school shall provide cardiopulmonary resuscitation training to students as part of the health course or the physical education course. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation certification published by a national accrediting body on heart health shall be required. A coach shall be required to earn a cardiopulmonary resuscitation certification also. Mr. Chairman, I have certainly enjoyed working with my friend, Representative Moser, and she's worked long and hard on this, and she would like to explain part of the bill as well. She's the expert.
Absolutely.
Well,
Go ahead.
Thank you, Representative Palumbo, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, for hearing this today. I have worked with the Batson family and the Mangine family on this language. I've worked with the Batson family since about 2013 or 2014 on Cameron's cause, getting AEDs in schools, long before I was here. This is a passion of mine. We are losing students. I think nationally the statistics are that we lose a student on an athletic field once every 3 days. So this is more common than we think. We are very careful to make sure that our students are safe in every other way in schools, and we just need to strengthen the emergency action plan and make sure that we have access to AEDs. Thank you.
I see that Chairman Moser and Representative Palumbo know to stop talking when we get a motion on the bill. We do have some questions. Representative Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Palumbo, Representative Moser. Thank you for bringing this bill, this very, very needed bill. A couple questions I have. First of all, in an athletic event, is the visiting team required to take this with them, or is the home team going to provide that? That would be a question.
Well, they will be available through the home team,
Okay.
but
And
they
the
are
second one,
portable.
Are all coaches required to get training, including assistants, volunteers, everybody?
Well, I think that's our goal, is to make sure that all coaching staff receive CPR training at at the very minimum and training on this AED. And Ruth Ann has an example of an AED here. It's very simple to use. In fact, we have the American Heart Association coming today to do training for all of us and anyone who is in the building today. So I just feel like it's really important that coaching staff and those individuals who are working directly with our kids get trained.
Thank you. If I could make
to
a
thank Commissioner Tackett, Julian Tackett, for bringing this AED to show you all what it really looks like. And it is portable, easily transported.
Thank you. Just a real quick comment. In November of 1992, at the end of the school day at Barron County High School, I had a young man outside my classroom that went down in an episode, and he passed away. And if that ever happens on your watch or near you, it is something that you will never forget. At that time, we didn't have AEDs. We tried our best to revive that young man, and those things are very disheartening. They're very troubling. It's something, this happened 30 years ago, I can still visualize the day. It was that heart-wrenching. So thank you guys for doing this, and thanks to the commissioner back there for all of his efforts in that also. Thank you very much.
Before we go to the next question, would your guest, I appreciate you being here today, would you like to make a statement or comment?
Yes, thank you. My son, Matthew Mangine Jr., passed away at soccer practice on June 16th, 2020. That's why I'm here in support of the bill. I actually found out about this on Sunday, so unfortunately I don't have anything very good prepared for today. I'm really here if you just have a question for a parent, and I'm here to support in any way to get this bill passed. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Mangine, we are certainly sorry for your loss. It's so tragic when a parent loses a child, and I appreciate you being here to advocate for other families today. We do have some additional questions. Representative Rollins.
Would you let us please know the cost, and also is there a cost with the training of the personnel?
Well, Commissioner Tackett, would you like to come to the table, Commissioner?
Commissioner, please identify yourself for the record, and then I will swear you in.
Okay. I'm Julian Tackett with Kentucky High School Athletics Association.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Well, the question came up about cost. We have worked with a company out of Indiana for a number of years to offer a price to our schools that's in the $800 and $900 range. Normally, you're looking at a couple of thousand retail, between $1,500 and $1,000. Right now, those units are running anywhere from $1,000 to $1,100. And they're really, you almost want to call them souped up, as Mr. Mangine and I were talking last week. Comes with other emergency supplies. Already in the requirements for coaches is a requirement that they be that they take CPR, first aid, including AED training. That generally runs anywhere from $15 every 2 years to as much as $30, depending on the hard card or what verification they want.
Okay.
But you would order them in bulk at $800 to $900.
They've already committed to coming really close to the price we offered to schools.
Is this an expense the local school district will be taking on, or how would they be funded?
I can answer that. So the way the language is written now, that is the case. The local school district would take on the expense if they haven't already. Most schools have AEDs, and so my goal is really to strengthen the emergency action plan, which costs nothing. We know that CPR training and getting to a child who has collapsed with sudden cardiac arrest within the first 3 minutes will exponentially increase their survival rate. CPR is the first initiated sequence of emergency actions, and then if an AED is available, it increases survivability. So the funding that we have, or the lack of funding now, is a conversation that we're having. We have worked with foundations such as the Mangines One Shot Foundation and others, Cameron's Cause, and others to provide AEDs in school free of charge. We have considered inserting language that would create a trust to accept funds, donations, grants, a state appropriation. If we ever decide to do that, it would be available, but right now we don't have an appropriation ask.
Can I have a question from, have another comment?
Yes, so part of this bill is also more than just the CPR certification, because most coaches in the state of Kentucky already have CPR and AED certification. Where the disconnect is right now is that's a 2-year, so you get your certification, that's a 2-year process. Part of this bill is, and Representative Mosier and I talked about it, the simulated aspect of the rehearsal training done, and actually Mr. Tackett and I talked about this the other day, seasonally, before every season. I mean, if you do it once a year and we had it in June, then it's going to be, basketball doesn't start until the fall. So that's part of this is foundations like mine and other programs out there, we offer seasonal training to these schools so that they actually get to do chest compressions, AED training more regularly. That's not a certification process, so we do it as a rehearsal. We saw on Monday Night Football that if you rehearse and practice this on a constant basis, you're better prepared than just taking a class once every 2 years.
And Representative Moser has arranged training following the education meeting.
Okay, so all members, please take note. We have a question from Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, and I appreciate what you're doing, and sir, I'm so sorry for your loss. Just a clarification. I know in Warren County, which I represent, a big high school may have 5 or 6 different events going on at the same time with play practice and all that. My question was, would they have to have one at each of these events, or is it one centrally located? What's the protocol for that?
Right now, the bill says in each building, one in each building.
Okay.
Easily accessible, readily accessible.
Okay.
And part of the emergency plan is that everybody knows where it is.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a question from Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Support this. Thank you for bringing the bill. I was just curious about elementary schools and why the decision for just middle and high and not elementary.
We just wanted to start with middle and high schools because that's where the more stringent athletic programs exist.
Thank you.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that it won't go to elementary schools in years to come.
Thank you.
We have a question or comment from Representative Timoney.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee. Thank you, sir. That press conference was one of the hardest press conferences I've been through. I didn't want to be brought up front during it, but this is something that's really, really important, and your story was outstanding. Thank you for turning that sorrow into a passion to help others. Quick question and then a follow-up comment. Are there recommendations for number of AEDs per enrollment?
I actually spoke with an architect who designs schools and recommended to him and asked him if in the future designs he would put AED locations by size of the school. Some schools are small. They might just need one. Other schools are larger and they might need 6. So that's something we're working on, is to try to get future buildings in Kentucky to have
Thank you.
AED locations.
But it's not in this language. We haven't stipulated a number of AEDs. That's up to the school.
Thank you. Chairman, follow-up comment.
Go ahead.
As a former coach and a former school administrator, that the best part of this bill is not the actual object sitting on the desk there in front. It's the plan, and how well thought out it's been, how this is to be done seasonally. Because I know very well that your athletic trainers who will have a mobile AED will be in a different spot during different seasons. And your staff, your custodians, your coaches, your students need to know where those people are and the patterns. So this is incredibly well thought out, and the best part of this bill is the practicing part. So thank you for bringing this forward, and this is going to have a direct impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question from Representative Bojanowski.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. So in the language, it says that it should be in every middle and high school building and at every school-sanctioned athletic practice or competition. So it's just a little confusing on whether that would be elementary school-sanctioned practices as well. So,
Middle and high school.
okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions at this time, with House Bill 331 of the committee sub having a motion and a second, Mariah, take the roll.
Representative Baker? Yes. Representative Ballman? Yes. Representative Bojanowski?
Yes.
Representative Brown?
Yes.
Representative Emily Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Josh Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Doan?
Yes.
Representative Jackson?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massaroni?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
Yes.
Representative Rawlings?
Yes.
Representative Raymond?
Yes.
Representative Riley? Yes. Representative Timoney?
Yes.
Representative Truitt?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Yes.
Chair Tipton?
Yes. House Bill 331 of the committee sub attached passes with favorable expression. The same should pass on the House floor. There is a title amendment on this. Do I hear a motion and a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. Motion passes. Thank you all so much for your being here this morning and for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and you just voted to save lives in Kentucky. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is House Bill 421, Representative Timoney. If he would go to the table and any guest he may have with him. If you all would both please identify yourself for the record, then I will administer the oath.
Thank you, Chairman. State Representative Killian Timoney, 45th District.
Ed Massey, Boone County, Kentucky.
Dr. Carrie Ballinger, Superintendent, Rockcastle County Schools.
Would y'all please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do. Representative Timmy? The differences in the committee sub and the original bill.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. And thank you, committee. There is a committee sub, and the committee sub is the equivalent of House Bill 158, which I had filed earlier. It is the teacher affidavit bill. Basically, all that addition does is it removes the word affidavit and changes it to the word statement. It's a procedural personnel management phrase that this change will definitely improve the personnel management for school systems and how they monitor absences in school systems.
I have a motion and a second. We do have a question, but I've got a question first. Could you, with an affidavit, is it required to have a notary notarize that document?
Yes, sir, it does. It does require a notary.
By changing this, are you removing the requirement for a notary to have to notarize that document?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make that clear to everyone. They're still signing a statement. It just does not require a notary to certify that is the true identity of that individual.
That's correct. It's still illegally. They're making a legally binding signature.
Okay, we have a motion and second on the sub. Seeing no questions, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed, no. The committee sub 1, the House Bill 421, is now on the table. Please proceed.
Thank you. Before I begin, I'm going to go ahead and let my guests here introduce themselves briefly.
Great.
Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Carrie Ballinger. I am the current superintendent of Rockcastle County Schools.
Good morning. I'm Ed Massey. I served on the Boone County School Board for 22 years. I served here for 4, and it's good to be back in front of all of my colleagues.
Please proceed.
We have a little background that may be helpful to understanding what House Bill 421 as provides a few additional changes to the legislation enacted during the 2022 regular session. Last session, the General Assembly enacted House Bill 678, which put in place a temporary expedited facilities review and approval process for public school construction. There are quite a few provisions that go along with House Bill 678 that we're going to continue or continuing to evaluate. Ultimately, local school boards have sit in a stronger position as far as the direction of their school construction projects. Currently, over 150 districts are utilizing this expedited process out of 171 total. So obviously, it is very, very popular expedited process. During the time, Kentucky Department of Education is undertaking a review of this entire construction process, looking at all related agency administrative regulations, incorporated materials, design manuals, and district guidance materials relating to the construction, renovation, and modification of school facilities. KDE will provide the General Assembly this comprehensive analysis by June 30th in 2023. There are 3 additional suggestions resulting from the continued conversations with school districts about implementation of this expedited process. The proposed language would allow a local school board of education to enter into an agreement for the construction of adjoining road improvements and requires the transportation cabinet to reimburse the cost of these improvements. This allows school districts to pay for these initial improvements for local or state road improvements quickly and seek reimbursement from the transportation cabinet. The second thing, allows but does not require the option for a local school district to submit a request for proposals for competitive procurement of guaranteed energy savings contracts based on the decommissioning and sale or transfer of inefficient buildings and property and the construction, renovation, or modification of new energy-efficient district buildings and properties. And lastly, it requires the KDE to establish an optional program of professional development for school district facilities and property management. It includes an emergency clause as this expanding previous legislation that is providing a temporary process and is under study.
Let me go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I'll be happy to address 678 was a bill that I carried last year that was passed. I know that you've just heard how many districts have adopted that. I've been told that it has greatly streamlined the ability to do construction. You may recall that with the changing cost and prices of the substances needed to erect a school, we have one particular case where a middle school, they had secured bonding, but by the time it received approval from the Kentucky Department of Education, the prices had increased to the point that they could no longer bond the school. So that's the reason we did this. We also got approval with the KDE and joint work together to allow us to help them with that model guideline that they're talking about. So we actually have people that are participating on that to make sure that it's streamlined effectively going forward. This bill, the idea was to extend that to the purchasing. We started with the purchase of property because there's a lot of situations that are controlled by size and scope, et cetera. But there are certainly school districts that have little pieces of property or they want to acquire something that's adjoining to them with the idea that in the future they may be able to acquire more. And based on the former statutory language or the current statutory language, unless this is passed, it prohibited them from doing so. So this would allow them to do that. But furthermore, as we developed through this, we did this for a year in the interim. We met every month. In fact, I think my last meeting was in December of 2022, sure. And then because I was leaving the legislature, I turned it over to Representative Timoney, and we worked on this through the process. We found out these turning lanes were a major problem. I did not know that. I learned that through this process that has actually held up a lot of construction sites because they could build the facility, but the ingress and egress out of the facility was hampered because of the cost of putting in a turn lane for that purposes of that construction. So that's why that particular piece is in there. The other thing is there's, as I already indicated, various pieces of property that the school district may already own, or a piece of property that may be less than the required amount of acreage needed for a particular project, but it would allow the school district to engage in the purchase of that, which is very difficult because if you know anything about the school world, what happens is when people get wind of construction projects, developers like to move in around the school to build the homes, and that elevates the prices. So we need to be able to move swiftly without having to wait for that kind of approval. So I've worked with, we worked with many people across the aisle. It was truly bipartisan. We worked with experts in the field. We worked with Mark Riles, who worked with school facilities for many, many years. And we worked with several legislators, both on the Senate side and on the House side. And I will have to give a shout out. I have to do that because Josh Collins is here in the room with us, and the work that he put in to draft this, which is very technical, was immense and much appreciated. So thank you, Josh. So I think, again, this is something that will assist schools as they do construction projects. It will keep costs down, which is certainly positive for the taxpayers because, the cost of building is going to continue to rise. So moving swiftly when you can seize the opportunity to do it cheaper is certainly going to better the community. So with that, we certainly appreciate your hearing this bill.
Yes, and I'm here today in support of this bill as the example that Representative Massey gave about the middle school actually occurred in my district. So we were moving forward with a construction project of a new middle school. We have a 50-year-old middle school in our district, and due to the cost of inflation and the amount of red tape that it took for us to amend our district facilities plan to show new construction versus renovation, prices rose, and we were no longer able to continue with the building of that project. I'm currently still working on that and trying to find avenues to move forward. But I absolutely support this bill as it provides local districts more control, and we're able to make decisions locally using our taxpayer monies wisely.
We have a motion and second on the bill. Do any members have any questions or comments? Representative Massaroni.
As far as the bonding issue, is it still based upon the school board members voting on those bonds? Would that affect that at all? So the school board members still have the final decision and the bonds are issued?
The process doesn't change. Okay. It just streamlines the approval mechanism. So before 678, 3 or 4 people made all decisions on every construction project in the state of Kentucky around schools. They were overworked, overwhelmed, didn't have the time nor the capacity to do it. When we talked with KDE, they agreed that there were problems, which is why they're trying to streamline the manual, which they thanked us in the sense that will give them the 2 years they needed to do that. So we've worked with not only KDE, but school districts, construction firms. Representative Branscombe, who is very familiar with this, was involved in this process. Senator Howell, who's also very familiar with schools and representation of them, worked on this. So this was basically not to change the process. You still have to meet all the requirements and regulations that are required under law. It just streamlines the approval process.
Do any other members have any questions right now? Seeing none, Mariah, call the roll.
Representative Baker? Yes. Representative Ballman?
Yes.
Representative Bojanowski?
Yes.
Representative Brown?
Yes.
Representative Emily Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Josh Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Doan?
Yes.
Representative Jackson?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massaroni?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
No.
Representative Rawlings?
Yes.
Representative Raymond?
Yes.
Representative Riley?
Quickly explain my vote. I would like to give a shout out to the former gentleman from Boone who spent an extensive amount of time on this. Even after he knew that he was no longer going to be in the legislature, he still spent a great deal of time. So I'd like to thank him, and it's a yes.
Representative Timoney?
Yes.
Representative Truitt?
Yes.
Representative Weber?
Yes.
Representative Wilner?
Yes.
Chair Tipton?
Yes. House Bill 421 with House Committee Substitute 1 passes with favorable expression. The same shall pass on the House floor.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you all
committee.
so much for your presentation today.
Thank you very much.
The next item on our agenda is House Bill 538. If Vice Chair Truitt and any guests he has will go to the table, please. Representative Truitt, with you and your guests, please identify yourself for the record, then I'll administer the oath.
Representative Timmy Truitt, 89th District.
Dr. Carrie Ballinger, Superintendent, Rockcastle County Schools.
And Eric Kennedy, the Director of Advocacy for the Kentucky School Boards Association.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Thank you, Representative Truitt. Please proceed.
All right, I guess we'll address first the committee sub.
Yeah, please explain the difference in the committee sub and the original bill.
All right, I'm going to turn to Mr. Kennedy to talk a little bit about the committee sub. After talking to some stakeholders, we addressed some of the issues that they had, and Mr. Kennedy helped kind of solve those problems. So.
Certainly, I believe that there are primarily two changes in the committee sub that is before you. On the sub itself, on page 3, lines 15 to 17, that is the bulk of one change, which clarifies that, as we will discuss in a moment, most of this bill deals with suspension and expulsion. There are lots of very important due process rights for students and their parents and guardians around those issues. And so school boards, there are certain hearings before the elected school board in some of these cases. In some districts, the board does those now and will continue to do those timely. There aren't many of them. In some larger districts, there might be a lot of these hearings. And in the interest of timely due process, it may be important for a board to create an appeals committee targeted towards hearing those to move them more quickly. Making sure that that is allowable is in that change. And then at the very end of the sub, the last two lines of the sub on page 8, 19, and 20, that is something that I believe you will see in a floor amendment that was already filed that is just rolled into this sub that clarifies that a couple of already existing requirements for things that school districts do to help students before they get to any point of something that we're discussing in this bill will still apply, are still required, or in no way being superseded by this bill.
Motion on the committee sub.
Second.
Did you get those? Who made that motion? Representative Timoney. Who was the second? Representative Massaroni. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on the committee sub? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Committee sub is adopted and is on the table. Representative Timoney.
Truitt.
I apologize. We
That's
got too many T's on this committee.
I mean, that's okay. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Okay.
But well, listen. As an elementary principal in my real job, this bill I see being very important when it comes to addressing problems with education. After having CASA here a couple weeks ago, we all sat through their presentation. And they talked about the three things they thought that were harming or hurting teacher retention and teacher recruitment. Those three things were pay, support, and respect. Obviously, this bill does not address the pay, but it does, in my opinion, address the support and the respect. This bill offers guidelines, procedures for how to handle disciplinary actions inside the school setting. It also, the goal of this is to empower teachers to control what happens inside their classrooms. And by doing both of these things, I believe we can help with recruitment and we can help with retention. Teaching, administration, whatever your job is in education is a great profession. And I don't want people to not go into their field that they choose because of fear. This bill will address some of those issues. We will get into some of the details here in a little bit about what the bill specifically does. But at this point, I would like to let my good friend from my neighboring county, Rockcastle, talk a little bit about why she feels that this bill is needed.
Thank you. So I will start with telling you just a little bit about my district. Rockcastle County is located southeastern Kentucky. We have 5 schools within our school district, and we serve roughly 2,800 students. So you may think we're in a rural community, you know, what could possibly be going on that would impact our teachers in that community? So I would like to share just a quick story of something that recently happened in my district. Actually just several weeks ago. We had a parent that dropped a student off at Rockcastle County Middle School making the statement, if something happens, don't call me, call law enforcement. The student refuses to go to class immediately, refuses to cooperate with administrators, with teachers, stating, I will fight the first person who looks at me. Enrollment records indicate that the student had been removed from a long-term mental health facility by the parent against medical advice just days before enrolling in our district. Within 2 weeks of enrollment, the student had been disciplined for inappropriate use of language with both staff and students, forcing a student to drink a bottle of perfume due to the alcohol content, making threats to staff and students, being in possession of an illegal vape, using vulgar language in the presence of young students on the bus. And in addition to these issues within the school building, this student was charged with shoplifting at a local school store and got into a violent physical altercation with the parent in which the mother's ear was severed. On the particular day in question, this student was simply asked to sit on the front row of the bus because of the language that she had been using around young students. While monitoring the afternoon bus radio, I hear a frantic call to send an SRO to the bus loop of an elementary school. When I arrived at the elementary school, I found that our 57-year-old female bus monitor had been attacked not only verbally, but had been physically chased off of the bus by this student and assaulted multiple times. So this 57-year-old bus monitor, that's someone's mother, that's someone's grandmother, that's our employee, and it's my responsibility to make sure every day that not only are our employees safe, but our students are safe. This bill gives me options to do so. I want you to keep in mind that this assault happened in front of a bus full of elementary and middle school students. This incident did not meet criteria for juvenile detention, therefore the child was charged with assault 4 and released to the parent. This was on a Friday. So on Monday, that student is placed back in my control with me having to make decisions. How do you move forward with that? I could expel that student, but I'm not certain that that's the best option. Because what happens a year later when that expulsion is complete and that student comes back into my school district? And the way that the law is currently written, there's no soft landing for these students. They go from being expelled to being placed right back in our classroom. There's no option for a transition period. There's no option for virtual instruction, easing a student back into the general classroom. But this bill allows that. This bill also would allow me the option not to expel this student in that I've just spoken about. I could have the option, therefore, to place this student on virtual instruction, making certain that I am able and the people that work in my school system are able to continue monitoring this student. Is this student receiving counseling services? Is this student going to a short-term mental health facility? Is this student keeping up within their studies? So it gives me options. I think the most important piece of information in this bill is, yes, this supports our teachers. Yes, this gives our administrators ability to make decisions on a case-by-case basis, because expulsion's not always the right answer. But maybe placing a student in an alternative school isn't the right answer. Or maybe placing a student with virtual instruction is the right answer. But it gives local school authorities options to make decisions based on a case-by-case basis, because we know our students better than anyone else. We know their needs. We know that everything is not a one-size-fits-all. We know that what might work for one student may be a disaster for another student. And this bill gives us options to make decisions at the local level to keep not only our employees safe, but our students safe as well.
Thank you, Dr. Ballinger. She did a great job explaining the purpose. I understand there's a lot of concerns. I mean, I do this every day. I handled a situation yesterday that that I would have liked to have had this as an option. But the purpose is to provide security and safety for your kids, my kids, and all your constituents' kids. And will it be more work on administrators? Yes. I'm sorry, principals. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, superintendents. It will. You will have to think outside the box on dealing with certain problems. You may have to do things that you've never done before. But we have to provide security for our teachers. We have to provide security for our bus monitors, for our cooks, our janitors, our paraprofessionals. Kind of go through a little bit about what the bill does, and then we'll take some questions. Part of the bill, if you're looking, at the beginning of the bill, a couple of the changes that were made is, and obviously this does provide some questioning and some concern, but that clear and convincing evidence of threats that pose a danger to the well-being of students, faculty, and staff of a district. All right, we take that in consideration. Go on through. It talks about another change. We could also provide this if something happens off.
Who made the second, please? Timothy. Okay. We do have a motion and a second on the bill. We do have an individual who has asked to speak on this. He can come forward at this time, Mr. Kumar Rashad. So please come forward. Yeah, just make sure that green light is on there in front of you, the mic. And
Right.
would you identify yourself for the record, then I will administer an oath.
Thank you, Representative Tipton. My name is Kumar Rashad. I'm a high school teacher in Louisville, Kentucky. My school is Breckenridge Metropolitan High School.
Okay, could you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. Like I said, I teach in Breckenridge Metropolitan High School in Louisville, Kentucky. It's an alternative school. And in this alternative school is comprised of folks who have had interactions with the criminal justice system. 90% of our students are black and about 85% are black males. I bring that up because, I was looking at the what's it called? The student discipline from the annual statistical report. And it said that, 36.8% of the students who were removed from classes were black, with expelled without services. And out of school suspensions was the same, 36.8%, and in school removal was that, which is problematic because the total representation of black students in school is 10.6. So we're disproportionately represented when it comes to the discipline procedures, and we have to really be careful. I understand the maker's point, I really do, because there are some issues that requires some students to be moved. But we gotta, really think about how we apply these concepts, because when they're applied unintentionally, they could be used to further that disparity, further that disproportionality of black students, not just black students, students of color, poor students, students with mental disabilities, will be maybe inadvertently affected by this. There are times where, people in my school who have been sent there, by, little story, some students may have gotten into a fight with other students, and in that, an adult tries to break that out, and inadvertently the adult gets hit, and then the student's charged with an assault on that adult, which probably shouldn't have been done that, and are sent to my school. And these are cases that happen a lot. So I just want you all to just think about how we define disciplinary issues. And, and when we're talking about expelling a student for a whole year, that's going to send these students out on the streets. You want crime to go up? Do that. That's exactly how you make crime go up. We need to protect the people. We need to protect the students. We need to protect the teachers as well. So I just think that we need to be way more careful when we're thinking about passing these bills. Do a lot of better example of defining discipline, because what's threatening to you all may not be threatening to me. It may be a cultural differences, because if you look around this room right now, this is how many of our schools look. Almost everybody there who's a teacher or admin is pretty much white, might have one black person to the side, or a person of color. It may, but for the most part, it really looks like this group right here. And oftentimes we don't all have the same culture. And if my culture, you deem my culture as offensive and threatening, then I'm being sent to an alternative school based on my culture, and not really, given a chance that another student would give, as far as taking a chance in restorative justice. So we need to really think about that. We need to think about passing more bills for mental health coordinators, options beside criminality, even putting history classes that celebrate everybody's culture in the classes, because a lot of times I brought my students with me, and they're part of a Black History course that I teach, and they're really making gains and efforts of trying to change their lives and really just turn it around and do the right thing. So we've got to give these children opportunities to do that, because discretionary choices to kick a student out of school for 12 months, even if they sent to an alternative school or not, that's a choice. You have the choice to turn it to alternative school, a choice to just expel. And if you're expelling these kids on the street, and we're in trouble. We're in trouble, y'all.
Mr. Rashad, thank you for your testimony. I've actually visited alternative schools in my district. The one I'm invited to their graduation every year. Y'all do great work, and appreciate you and the other teachers in that role.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
We do have some members with questions. The first is Representative Bojanowski.
I have a couple, but I'll try to be kind of brief. So first of all, just to clarify, students with disabilities would still have to follow the process for IDEA, correct?
That is correct. That's federal law.
Okay. And then I've totally forgotten my second question here. I did have similar concerns to Kumar and his statement about how are we taking care of our kids who have the behavior issues. And I dug into current statute and do feel that in our MTSS systems and our other systems that have been set up in statute, that we do have a process for supporting our kids. As far as, I did remember, may I ask one more? Yes, thank you. It was an early morning.
Briefly, please.
Yes. Could you speak on how alternative schools are funded?
Thank you for the question. There is essentially no special dedicated explicit revenue stream from the state government for any kind of alternative educational programming. There are different kinds of alternative schools. Often when we say that term, we think only in terms of sort of discipline programs, but there are actually a sort of wide variety of alternative educational settings where students are served for all sorts of different reasons, and sort of discipline programs are one of them. That is essentially no different than any other school program. Students counted in attendance for state SEEK funding. So I guess the answer is just the same as any other school, essentially, with nothing necessarily additional or special.
Our next question comes from Representative Raymond.
Thank you. I wanted to understand the virtual landscape. If we're switching, if some students will be expelled or placed into a virtual program for a year, would this be a statewide initiative? Is each district responsible? Would it be synchronous, asynchronous? Would we have to assign a grade level teacher to each sort of cohort of expelled students? Does it exist already? And then what happens if students fail in that environment?
Okay, good question. All 3 or 4 or 5 of those questions are all good. Yeah, basically it would depend on the district. I mean, districts, each district's different, and that's the hard thing about education. We try to pass bills and create laws that work for every single area in the state of Kentucky, which is almost impossible. So that's the reason that the district input and the district policies are so important. As we've seen through, over the last, I guess 2.5, 3 years with COVID, it did open up new tools that we've never used before. One of those tools being virtual instruction. I'm at no point am I saying that virtual instruction is as good as in-person instruction, but it is an option. And what this bill does is it opens that up as opposed to expulsion. It would allow that student to still participate inside in the class, maybe from a different location, maybe from a resource room, maybe from home. But our goal is ultimately we don't want to expel kids. We don't want kids outside the school setting. But this bill will open up that opportunity of using virtual as an option, as opposed to a student being chronically disruptive inside the classroom.
Okay, next question comes from Representative Rayburn.
Chairman, I actually have a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Please proceed one at a time.
Okay, my first question is this. I appreciate the intent of this bill first, but also, have you had conversations with the county attorneys, specifically with Section 2 of the bill? If a student was to physically assault, batter, or abuse educational personnel or other students off school property, and the incident is likely to substantially disrupt the educational process, under the provisions of this bill, that student could be, removed from the school. Have you spoke with the county attorneys to regarding the intent of this legislation?
Me personally, I have not talked to any county attorney specifically about this wording here. It has been looked at by many attorneys, though, and I believe that if you'll look there, it talks about the board may modify the expulsion requirement on a case-by-case basis. Before that, it talks about off-school property. If the incident is likely to substantially disrupt the education process. So I think that goes back to giving that local district, that local board, the flexibility in handling this situation the way they deem best fit. And I guess, can I refer to my lawyer?
I'm not your lawyer. That may come back later. I need to make sure I say that on the record. That part, if you look at on page 2 of the sub, lines 7 and 8, there is some similar language that's in the state statutes now, which gets to sort of this is all about school discipline happening based on conduct of a student. The current language talks about conduct of a student at a school or school function, so like a dance that may happen in some venue off of school property. And so this language is very similar that's being added to say that whether or not the criminal justice system or law enforcement happens for something outside, totally unrelated to schools, is sort of schools have no control over, of course, and not a lot of direct role in. This is trying to tie it back to school discipline in some way being tied to something that, yes, was conduct off of school property, but that may have some tie back and connection to disrupting what is happening in the schools. That is something, that issue, that concept of how far can school discipline go for something that's not happening in the school but is related and connected to what's happening in school, is something, frankly, that has been litigated over the years across America. It's kind of a balance in several even U.S. Supreme Court decisions on how far a school can go with school discipline for something that is impacting the school but happened off of school property. This language is pretty narrowly written to be in line with the current state of the law on that. Of course, we cannot change the U.S. Constitution or interpretations of it, but that is kind of what that's trying to get to. So there again, that's something that's been around a long time that schools have sort of dealt with. Some examples of that might be kind of to Dr. Ballinger's point earlier. One student may have done something to another student after school one day, totally unrelated to off-school property, not at a school function, and it may or may not rise to the level of a crime in the juvenile justice system, but then both of those kids show up the next morning to sit next to each other in a classroom. You're going to have some problems that schools must respond to. That's what that's trying to get to. That probably didn't fully answer the question, but I hope it spoke to it.
So you had one follow-up?
To this, yes, and then
Okay.
I've got a couple more questions if I can. I would argue that that section of the bill is completely unconstitutional. I don't believe it's the proper role of the school to interfere with what happens out after school hours. They shouldn't be policing students. I understand safety and well-being of a student. And I believe on a case-by-case scenario, if a situation were to arise where two students were sitting beside each other, I'm sure schools do this now, where they intervene and separate them the best that they can. But to go out and to police after school hours, that's not their job. Schools have a big enough job as it is. This is unconstitutional. Chairman,
Please proceed. Briefly, we have several questions, members wishing to ask questions.
well, I'll go ahead and just make a statement on the bill. Here in a minute, we're going to take a vote on this bill. I urge my colleagues on this committee to vote no. You know, I heard on another bill in this committee earlier today, House Bill 288, that we've got to follow due process. This bill does not follow due process. Quite frankly, it doesn't follow due process for students. It doesn't follow due process for the parents. Furthermore, as this bill reads, students will be removed from class for unfounded reasons. I know personally of students who are removed from class right now due to retaliation. It has nothing to do with their behavior. They simply could have just stood up to throw away a piece of trash, or asked to go to the restroom, or asked a question about their curriculum. I know this bill was not drafted geared towards those students, but this is a real issue happening in our public schools. So I urge my colleagues to vote no on this piece of legislation. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We have to hit pause, and we have to pass something meaningful here. Thank you.
Okay, we have 6 more members who have asked to be recognized. I'm gonna stop it right there for those 6 members due to time. Our next comment comes from Representative Emily Callaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your hard work on this, because I've heard the same feedback about safety in the classroom, and we do need to empower our teachers without doing it unconstitutionally. So I appreciate the work on this. And I voiced a little bit of my concern when we discussed this previously. As an instructor who has tried to balance virtual and in-person teaching, there's little to no accountability that can happen on the virtual end. So my concern is the process of the accountability for the person who's who is receiving the virtual. If there isn't, as we're blessed in Louisville to have the alternative program, the alternative school that as an option for those teachers, and that was my concern, is just the virtual instruction, who that would fall to, and accountability for that. And we just don't want them to fall through the cracks. Thank you for your time.
Next question from Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Truitt and presenters, thank you for your hard work on this bill. Those of us who have been in education or on school boards appreciate what you're trying to do. I think you are setting high expectations for all students. This has to do with discipline or behavior. We do the same thing in academics. We set high expectations for all students academically. And I think this is setting high expectations for all students discipline-wise. What are we trying to do? We're trying to make the classroom a safe environment for not only a teacher, but also for those other 25 students that want to learn, that their parents are sending them to school in order to get an education. So that's the high expectation that this bill brings on, and it gives a little teeth to administration and school districts in order to deal with those students who do not abide by the rules. Dr. Ballinger, thank you for sharing your story. That's a prime example that people that have not been in the school system sometimes do not understand. You let one young lady, one student, disrupt the whole process for your school district, and especially that middle school. The parents couldn't do anything with them, but yet you were expected to do something with them. And that's not what the school system's set up to be. So thank you for sharing that story for those who do not deal with education on a daily basis like some of us have, because that's what reality is, and that's what's happening out there, not only in your school, but all schools across the state of Kentucky. So thank you very much, each of you, Eric as well. Thank each of you for what you've done, and I encourage my colleagues to vote yes.
Next question or comment comes from Representative Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Truitt, thank you for bringing forward a measure that addresses an issue, and I applaud you for that. My question is for Dr. Ballinger. So, Representative Tipton and I were the only two members of this committee who were in the General Assembly in 2015. At that time, we voted on a bill that raised the dropout age from 16 to 18. My question to you, and we heard a discussion at that time that we were forcing children, young people to remain in school who did not want to be there. And my question for you is, do you think raising that dropout age from 16 to 18, keeping students who don't want to be in school, is adding to our problem with disciplinary issues?
That question is often debated. My personal opinion is yes, I do think it probably is contributing to our discipline problems, but I think that that's a responsibility that we owe our students to take on. I think as public school educators, the beauty about public education is we educate all students. So whether they want to be there or they don't want to be there, it's our responsibility to make sure that they graduate from our public school systems ready to go into the workforce, ready to go into society as a successful citizen. So yes, it probably does contribute, but I think that it's well worth the efforts that we give.
Thank you for your response. I do appreciate that.
Next, we have Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Truitt, and for both of you who testified. I really love the intent of this bill. And Dr. Ballinger, your story was very compelling about the need for this. I guess my concern and some of the questions I have are about some of the unintended consequences. And as we heard from Mr. Rashad, we know that we have very disproportionate outcomes in discipline by race, by poverty, by disability, by these other concerns. And I just, this is the kind of thing that keeps me awake nights, honestly. And the bill like this is, really focuses my attention here. Are there any guardrails in place that you could point out to me in the bill to address the disparities issues that would make me feel more comfortable voting yes on the bill today?
I'm guessing the concerns are coming from on page 5, where it talks about a student may be removed from the classroom up to 3 times. And once again, I understand the concern there. I mean, I live this daily. Are there personal conflicts? Yes, there can be. Is everybody's idea of disruption or disruptive student different? Yes, I agree 100%. And that's the main reason we put in that next option there, that next bullet right below that, where it says a principal may require a review of classroom issues. It's not it's not a principal's job to create that. It's one of those things. Every teacher handles things differently. Their classroom management is different. So what happens is we give the principal here an opportunity to review the classroom procedures with the teacher, maybe with the parent, guardian, or whoever has legal custody, and they can determine a course of action. If the principal sees that this is simply a student that's not bringing their pencil to class, obviously a good principal, a good superintendent, a good board is going to step in and say, listen, this is not grounds for any type of punishment. This is a time for you to step in as principal and decide what course of action needs to be taken. Will this bill be taken advantage of? Possibly. I think every bill has that opportunity, but that doesn't stop the fact that we have to do something different. We have to make a change. Change is not welcomed. Change is tough sometimes. Is this perfect? Is this a perfect bill? No, it's not. It's not. But I think it's a step in the right direction. My goal is not to have more kids expelled. My goal is to have safety in the classroom and provide instruction to those students, as opposed to expelling students and kicking them outside the school setting. That's the purpose.
Thank you.
Next, Representative Josh Callaway.
Thank you, Representative Truitt. Appreciate you taking this issue on, no doubt. We have a lot of issues going on in our society, a lot of different reasons why that they exist. I remember when I was in school, if I got in trouble at school, I got in trouble when I got home too. And that's just the way that it was. And I think it comes down to that authoritative position that the teacher holds as well as the parent holds. And we're trying to go through a plethora of things this session to address different issues, parental rights, and everything of that sort. But my question is, and you just touched on a little bit, so starting on line 23 on page number 4, what would that due process look like when we get into this situation to where a student is deemed to be disruptive? Could you just explain a little bit what due process would look like whenever we get to this point?
All right, good question, Representative Callaway. Kind of go back and we'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, you started on line 22. That's the one that basically says, if this kid has an IEP, these penalties may not apply. But then you go on a little bit farther. a teacher may immediately remove or cause to be removed the student from the classroom, and the student shall not re-enter the same classroom for the remainder of the school day without the agreement of the teacher. Now, I'll kind of explain a little bit what happens in my building. All right, first off, in my building, if I have a student who is disruptive, and that teacher says, "Listen, little Johnny's got to go. He's not capable of sitting still today and listening and participating with others or playing well with others," then what I do right now is I will take that kid. Sometimes that kid will hang out with me for a little while. I may take that kid to a resource room. I may even call the mom and say, "Hey, listen, Mom, we're having an issue. Little Johnny's struggling today. What's your thoughts on little Johnny going home today?" Those type issues is kind of the way we handle it in my elementary school. Now, what I'm hearing from other districts and from other teachers, their concern is they'll have a student who is combative, disruptive, will not obey any classroom rules, and they'll send the student out of the classroom, and may even have to escort that student to the administrator. But then that student beats that teacher back to the classroom, and it's not going to change the way a good administrator handles or de-escalates situations, but it is going to force some administrators to step up their game and do what's needed, appropriate to handle a situation that a teacher sees needs to be handled in their classroom. Does that help at all?
It does. It if I may, Mr. Chairman, it seems like that it's somewhat subjective, correct, to the teacher and the individual. But I guess the main thing that I was listening for is what I'm not hearing, and that is the things that are not taken into consideration in this situation. It sounds like it's just the situation. It's not anything to do with any characteristics of the child, but the behavior of the child. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Next, we have Representative Lewis.
Just a comment, really. This bill, I appreciate your all's hard work on this bill, and it is much needed. But if I'm listening correctly, this bill does not say you have to expel. It just says we're providing a greater range of services while trying to protect our other students and staff. That's the nutshell of which this bill was created. And also, I would say that most of this bill deals with older students. The language for the younger elementary part, we might be able to do a little work on that. But this bill right here, I think, comes about from the things we've heard happening in districts around the state. So I think this bill is much needed, and I think the intent of this bill is going to do what it's supposed to do and give our districts a better way to handle our disruptive students and protect our staff. So thank you for the bill.
Thank you, Representative Lewis.
Representative Riley, you came in just under the wire, but I'm going to show some grace today, allow you to have a question or comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't have any questions. I've got some comments. The status quo cannot continue in schools. It just can't. We see a lot of this information in the news and a lot of the problems that are going on. It is not fair to the 95% of our students who go to school to learn to not be able to learn in the classroom because of the constant disruptions. It is not fair to them. Their parents sent them to school to learn. And, a lot of teachers have told me in the last 2 or 3 years, and I've been retired from education for about 8 years, and I know the two gentlemen sitting to my left have been involved in this a lot, but this cannot continue. Our former chair lady, husband died from his wounds from breaking up a fight in school. Not in an urban school, in a rural school. Teachers are not sent to school to break up fights. I don't even remember that being a part of our training. Did anybody have that in class where you had to learn how to break up a fight? Although I did a bunch. And the constant disruptions that are happening in classrooms have enormously and negatively impacted our students to learn, and it's a reflection of what's going on in our society today. The status quo cannot continue, and this bill is a step toward ending the status quo. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to thank all the members for the questions and comments. At this time, Mariah, call the roll.
Representative Baker? Yes. Representative Ballman? Yes. Representative Bojanowski?
May I explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to be a yes vote today, and what I'd like to say is a student who is acting out is trying to tell us something. We need to figure out what that student is trying to say and provide every student support so that they can be successful in the classroom and in society. And I would argue that every student who comes into our buildings wants to learn. We just have to break down those barriers or whatever is concerning that student to help them to be learning. Thank you.
Representative Brown?
Yes, may I explain my vote, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I intently listened to the bill, the amendments, the sub, and the information that has been passed on to us today. Initially, my feeling was that this is something that's necessary. I think discipline is necessary. We need to have a safe environment for students to learn. But then Mr. Rashad came to the mic and threw out some things that I think are very important. I think as much as the intent of this bill is to establish discipline in the schools and for children to learn in our school system, I think Mr. Rashad pointed out some unintended consequences. And being in an urban school district, and I'm from an urban district, I think it's very important to take those things into consideration of what possibly unintended consequences could be. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I vote no.
Representative Emily Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Josh Callaway?
Can I explain my vote?
Please proceed.
I'm going to vote yes today, moving this out of committee. I do have a few things that I know you're open to discussion, and so I will get with you on those, and I appreciate the intent.
Representative Decker?
Yes.
Representative Doan?
No.
Representative Jackson?
Yes.
Representative Lewis?
Yes.
Representative Massaroni?
Yes.
Representative McCool?
Yes.
Representative Rayburn?
I'd like to explain my vote, please.
Please proceed.
I'm going to be voting no. As I've noted before, there's no due process for students or for parents. This bill is unconstitutional. I feel that we need to invite the county attorneys to this conversation for Section 2 of this bill. And I do fear of retaliation for some situations within this bill. Not for all teachers, but in some situations this would apply. And as we talked about behavioral issues, in Jefferson County particularly, this is not a new situation. Jefferson County has been dealing with major issues since I attended school there, and I think we need to go back to the drawing board and continue working. Thank you.
Representative Rawlings?
Yes.
Representative Raymond?
Yes.
Representative Riley? Yes. Representative Timoney?
Briefly explain my vote.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm voting yes today. I think that this bill is a critical first step that we need to send a message that behavior in school needs to improve, rural and urban. As a former teacher and administrator in an urban district, I think that there's work that needs to be done. But I also I feel strongly that our superintendents and our school boards are prepared to make those decisions. We need to put teacher safety and loss of instruction at the forefront moving forward. Thank you.
Representative Truitt,
Yes.
Representative Weber,
Yes.
Representative Wilner.
May I explain my vote?
Please proceed.
Thank you. It really hurts my heart to vote no on this because I think it's needed, but I think I'm too concerned about the unintended consequences. And I received a message while I was sitting here from a student who said they keep talking about behavior and what to do, but what are they doing to encourage the students to keep doing good? Me personally, I give up when I have nobody encouraging me or nothing to go after. And I'm just need to listen to that student and need to listen to my concerns about disparities and what we may do to increase those and vote no today. Thank you.
Chair Tipton.
Yes. With 17 aye votes and 4 no votes, House Bill 538 with primary House Substitute 1 passes with favorable expression. The same should pass on the House floor. That is the last item on our agenda today. The meeting is adjourned.